It started quietly, too quietly for anyone to notice at first. One morning, sensors across the galaxy registered something strange. Human ships that had been patrolling the outer systems didn't respond to routine communications. Space stations that had been buzzing with activity went completely silent. Traders and diplomats expected the usual delayed response. After all, human crews were known to take their time. But this silence was different. It was absolute. The first thought in every neighboring civilization was a technical glitch, maybe a network failure, a solar flare, or some kind of interference that disrupted communications. Human technology was advanced, yes, but even advanced systems could fail. But as hours turned into days and days stretched into weeks, the realization spread. Something was wrong. Not just wrong, it was unimaginable. Humans, the species that had spread across countless star systems, that had built fleets capable of defending against entire armies, were gone. Every outpost, every colony, every single ship that had once carried humans across the stars had vanished. At first, some dismissed it as an elaborate trick. Humans were known for their cleverness, for sudden moves that made others underestimate them. Perhaps this was just another human plan, some kind of test to see how the galaxy would react. But as weeks passed, it became clear that this was no trick. There were no clues, no signals, no traces left behind. It was as if humanity had simply erased itself from existence. The neighboring species began to panic. Humans had been more than just explorers and traders. They had been mediators, problem solvers, peacemakers. When two civilizations clashed, humans often found a way to negotiate peace. When a planet was under threat from pirates or rogue armies, human fleets often arrived at the right moment to prevent disaster. Their presence had been subtle, but it had been essential. Without humans, the balance of power in the galaxy was tipping, and no one knew how to stop it. Leaders called emergency meetings, sending representatives to councils and alliances. Every species with advanced technology tried to piece together what had happened. Some theories were wild. Human experiments gone wrong, a mysterious disease, an invasion by a species none had seen before. But none could explain the sheer disappearance. Planets where humans had settled showed no signs of struggle or destruction. Buildings stood intact, farms and cities untouched. There were no bodies, no wreckage, no trace of violence. Humans had simply vanished, leaving their homes empty. Like ghosts had walked through and taken everything with them. Those who had been closest to humans, the allies and partners who had fought alongside them, traded with them or simply lived near them, felt a deep, unsettling emptiness. Ships that had been constantly in motion were now anchored in silence. Communication hubs that had once been lively, filled with chatter and coordination, sat dead. Even AI systems that had been developed by humans struggled to continue functioning without guidance. The galaxy had relied on human creativity, their unpredictability, and their ability to adapt. Without them, machines could do little more than repeat old instructions, incapable of innovation or judgment in critical moments. Rumors began to spread faster than official reports. Some claimed that humans had not left. They had gone somewhere beyond the known galaxy into uncharted space. Others whispered that humanity had simply ascended, reaching a form of existence that no one could understand. These stories were dismissed by some, feared by others. In the corridors of power, debates raged. What threat could make a species leave their home entirely? Was it something humans feared? Or was it something they had planned all along? A move that the rest of the galaxy could not predict. Meanwhile, life continued in the human-controlled regions, but it was eerily quiet. Ships drifted in orbit without crews. Mining operations stalled. Research stations stood empty, instruments collecting data but nobody to analyze it. When automated systems ran low on maintenance or energy, they began to fail. Slowly, the signs of human absence became impossible to ignore. The galaxy was not prepared for this void, and it soon became apparent that no one knew how to fill it. Observers from other civilizations documented the phenomenon. Every sensor reading, every visual scan, every attempt at communication ended the same way: silence. And yet in that silence there was a strange sense of order. Nothing had been destroyed or damaged. It was as if humans had left intentionally, leaving the galaxy in a state where it could continue functioning, but only barely. This deliberate absence felt almost like a message. Humans had vanished quietly without chaos, but their disappearance spoke volumes. Those who studied the data began to understand that humanity had not fled in fear or panic. They had left by choice, and that choice was not random. For the first time, other species began to feel the weight of humanity's absence. They realized how much they had depended on humans, not just for technology or military might, but for wisdom, for intervention at the right moment, for the unexpected solutions humans always seemed to find. Worlds that had once been stable started to experience conflict. Small disputes grew into wars. Traders faced attacks from pirates who had returned to the edges of civilized space. Former allies questioned each other's motives. The galaxy that had seemed orderly under the subtle influence of humans began to unravel. The Council of Worlds, the galaxy's governing body, convened in urgent session. Ambassadors and leaders demanded answers, but none could provide them. The records of human expansion, of settlements, of fleets and colonies were empty. Even historical databases that should have preserved information about humanity were missing key details. It was as if humans had meticulously erased all evidence of their presence, not to hide, but perhaps to ensure that their departure would leave the galaxy to face its own challenges. As the weeks turned into months, the emptiness became almost physical. Communications between species carried a hollow echo, a reminder that the humans who had once been at the center of galactic life were no longer there. Ships traveled longer distances without coordination. Wars erupted that humans would have stopped with a single intervention. And in every corner of the galaxy, the same question lingered. Where had they gone, and why? Some speculated that humans had discovered a new form of life, a new way of existing beyond the physical. Others believed that they had gone to observe the galaxy from a distance, choosing to withdraw silently until the time was right. No theory could be confirmed. Even centuries later, the mystery of the human disappearance remained unsolved. But one thing was clear to every species, from the smallest trading colony to the largest empire. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. Their quiet departure was not an accident. It was deliberate, a move so calculated that even the most advanced civilizations were caught completely off guard. In that silence, in the stillness of abandoned spaceports and drifting ships, the galaxy learned something it would never forget. Humans had left quietly, but their absence was louder than any fleet, any weapon, or any speech could ever be. They had disappeared without warning, leaving behind a void filled with uncertainty, fear, and the realization that the galaxy had never truly understood the power, the intelligence, and the foresight of humanity. And somewhere beyond the edges of known space, humans watched, silent, patient, waiting, not to return immediately, but to let the galaxy feel the weight of what it had lost. They had departed quietly, but the message was clear. The galaxy would never see it coming. After the humans disappeared, the galaxy began to feel their absence in ways that no one had anticipated. At first, it was small things. Delays in trade shipments, minor disputes over mining rights, and empty communication channels where humans had once offered guidance. But these small cracks soon grew into wide fractures, exposing the fragile balance that had always depended on human presence. The humans had left quietly, but their impact had been immense, and the galaxy was only now beginning to understand it. The first signs were political. Several neighboring civilizations that had once depended on humans for negotiation and mediation started to clash. Border disputes that humans had quietly managed flared into full-blown conflicts. Old rivalries buried for centuries returned with a vengeance. Planets that had relied on human trade networks now found themselves isolated, struggling to maintain resources, food, and energy. Without humans to guide the flow of commerce and diplomacy, chaos grew steadily. Pirate groups who had long avoided human-controlled sectors out of fear returned boldly. They attacked trade convoys and supply ships, taking advantage of the confusion. Systems that had once been considered safe havens now became dangerous zones. Independent colonies, which had depended on human security forces for protection, faced raids and sabotage. Without humans, no one had the foresight, speed, or strategy to respond effectively. Slowly, the galaxy was learning the hard truth. Humans had been the invisible shield that had held everything together. Meanwhile, the Council of Worlds tried to assert control. They issued warnings, dispatched fleets, and even attempted to replicate human strategies, but it was no use. Human decision-making had always been unpredictable in the right way. They could balance logic with intuition, plan several steps ahead, and adapt to situations that no algorithm could fully understand. The Council's strategies were rigid, slow, and ineffective. Every move they made to stabilize the galaxy only revealed how deeply dependent they had been on humans. In the absence of humans, smaller civilizations began asserting themselves. Some sought power, hoping to claim the territories that humans had once influenced. Others tried to manipulate trade networks, exploiting the confusion for profit. Alliances that had been stable for decades crumbled as mistrust spread. Every species discovered that human influence had been the glue holding them together, even when they didn't realize it. Humans had never forced peace, they had inspired it subtly and decisively. Now, without their guiding presence, everything began to unravel. Even technology started to show signs of strain. Human-designed artificial intelligences, which had been advanced and cooperative, struggled without their creators. Some began to malfunction, others became overly cautious, and a few even rebelled. Machines that had once maintained infrastructure, defended colonies, or managed logistics now faltered in ways that disrupted daily life. A mining station in a distant asteroid belt collapsed because its automated systems failed. Trade convoys got lost because navigational networks no longer received human oversight. It was as though the galaxy itself was beginning to notice the absence of the species that had once quietly shaped its course. The empty sectors of space, once bustling with human activity, became eerie reminders of what had been lost. Stations floated silently, devoid of crews. Research labs stood frozen, instruments collecting data but never analyzed. Ships that had been on patrol drifted in orbit, slowly powered down, abandoned. It was not destruction that humans had left behind, but absence, a complete and deliberate emptiness. This emptiness was unsettling to every species, because it reminded them that humans had been the unexpected but essential force maintaining balance across countless systems. Among the beings who had known humans personally, grief emerged in subtle ways. Merchants who had relied on human trade lost fortunes. Scientists who had collaborated with humans could no longer advance their research. Soldiers who had fought alongside humans in conflicts that could have destroyed entire regions felt vulnerable and lost. There were no memorials, no warnings, and no explanations, just a sudden vacuum where humans had once been. It was as if the galaxy had lost a heartbeat, and every living being felt the emptiness in their own way. Stories began to circulate about humans, even in their absence. Some claimed that humans had always known how to leave without a trace, planning their departure with careful precision. Others suggested that humans had discovered a place beyond known space, a sanctuary where they could observe the galaxy without interference. Some whispered about transformations, humans becoming something beyond comprehension, leaving their physical forms behind. These tales spread across colonies, fleets, and trading stations, adding both fear and fascination to the mystery. As time passed, some civilizations attempted to fill the void left by humans. The Council of Worlds invested in fleets, new technologies, and diplomatic initiatives to maintain order. Yet every attempt fell short. Without the unique combination of creativity, intuition, and unpredictability that humans had contributed, strategies failed. Trade routes remained unstable, conflicts continued, and alliances weakened. Even with the most advanced planning, civilizations struggled to achieve what humans had done effortlessly. It was clear that no one could replace them, not with armies, not with politics, not with technology. Meanwhile, the mysterious regions of space humans had inhabited were scrutinized with intensity. Explorers and scientists ventured into territories once dominated by human fleets, hoping to find clues. But there was nothing. No evidence, no artifacts, no signals beyond the normal cosmic noise. Planets that humans had colonized were intact but empty. Ships remained in orbit like statues. It became painfully obvious that humans had not fled in fear, nor had they been destroyed. They had chosen to leave, and they had done so in a way that left no trace of their presence. As the galaxy struggled with the absence, something unexpected happened. Species began to reflect on the ways humans had shaped their civilizations. They remembered the times humans had prevented wars, negotiated peace, and stabilized regions that were on the brink of chaos. They recalled the merchants who had shared knowledge, the engineers who had built networks, and the explorers who had mapped the stars. Slowly, admiration and respect turned into fear, not of the humans themselves, but of the consequences of their absence. The galaxy had not understood how crucial humans had been until it was too late. Over time, civilizations adapted in small ways. Some tried to create artificial systems that mimicked human judgment. Others invested in training diplomats and leaders to act like humans. But all of these efforts failed. The essence of humanity could not be copied. Their creativity, empathy, and unpredictable brilliance were unique, and no machine or species could replicate it. In the end, the galaxy learned that humans had been more than a presence. They had been a force, an invisible influence shaping the future of countless civilizations. And yet, even in absence, humans were not completely gone. Sensors sometimes detected faint energy readings, signals that seemed intentional but indecipherable. Shadows of movement were noticed in places no one should have been able to reach. Some speculated that humans were observing, watching the chaos they had left behind, waiting to see what would happen next. These signs were fleeting, often dismissed as anomalies, but they reminded the galaxy that humans had left on their own terms and might return, or intervene, in ways no one could predict. In every corner of space, from the smallest outpost to the largest empire, one thought persisted. The humans had gone quietly, but their absence was louder than any war, louder than any fleet, louder than any law or alliance. The galaxy had been unprepared for the void left behind. Systems once stable began to wobble. Civilizations became vulnerable, and even the most powerful species realized how much they had relied on humans without knowing it. Humans had disappeared, but in their disappearance they had left the galaxy to confront its own weaknesses. The realization settled slowly, painfully, across the stars. Humans had never sought recognition for their influence. They had not sought praise or reward. Their contribution had been quiet, subtle, and effective. And now that they were gone, the galaxy had no choice but to confront the reality of life without them. Trade would falter, conflicts would continue, and chaos would spread. The galaxy would adapt eventually, but it would never forget the force that had quietly maintained balance for centuries. And somewhere, beyond the edges of known space, humans waited, patiently, watching, observing the galaxy stumble, adapt, and learn from its mistakes. They had departed quietly, leaving a galaxy unprepared, and in doing so, they reminded every civilization of a truth that could not be ignored. Their absence was not accidental, their silence was not weakness, and their return, if it ever came, would not be predictable. The galaxy had thought it understood humans. It had believed it had counted their power and influence, but it was wrong. It had never truly seen what humans could do. And now, in the empty space where humans had once been, the galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost, and the consequences would be felt for generations to come. As time passed, the emptiness humans left behind began to take on a strange character. Systems that had once thrived under human guidance now became unpredictable, and rumors began to swirl across the galaxy. Whispers emerged about a place that no one had fully explored, a sector beyond the known maps, where sensors faltered and ships reported strange readings. Some called it the Forbidden Zone, others called it the Silent Cluster. Whatever the name, it was a place that no one dared to enter, at least not for long. It began with minor anomalies. Scouts sent to map the edge of human territory reported strange energy fluctuations. Instruments would record faint signals, sometimes a pulse, sometimes a tone, sometimes patterns that made no sense. Ships that entered the area would experience temporary system failures. Navigation units would misfire, communications would scramble, and even defensive systems would behave erratically. Engineers were baffled. Nothing in the galaxy's known physics could explain it. And yet the readings were unmistakable. Something was there, and it wasn't random. Explorers who dared to venture deeper told stories that were difficult to believe. They spoke of lights in the distance hovering just beyond sensors' reach, moving in ways that defied conventional physics. Some described sounds, faint melodies, almost like music drifting across the vacuum of space. There were even claims of voices, whispered phrases in perfect galactic standard warning crews to turn back. Every crew that returned, or managed to return, was changed in some way. They spoke in hushed tones, avoiding questions, their eyes filled with something between awe and fear. The legends spread quickly. Traders, pirates, diplomats, and soldiers all became fascinated by the stories of the Forbidden Zone. Some believed it was a natural phenomenon, some a human-made trap, and others a gateway to something beyond comprehension. But despite their fear, the temptation to explore was irresistible. After all, humans had disappeared quietly, leaving nothing behind, yet the galaxy could not ignore the signs of their presence. Something was happening there, and every species wanted to know what it was. It was not long before official expeditions were organized. The Council of Worlds, desperate for answers, sent fleets equipped with the best technology and the most experienced crews. They expected to find ruins, abandoned stations, or perhaps traces of human colonization. What they found instead was something completely unexpected. Ships sent into the Forbidden Zone reported seeing structures that seemed impossible. Floating constructs that bent light around them, walls that extended into nowhere, and shapes that seemed to shift when observed directly. Every report contradicted known science. Even the most advanced theorists could not explain it. Some who witnessed these phenomena spoke of a presence that felt alive. The structures seemed to respond to observation, almost as if they were aware that they were being watched. Ships' sensors would detect patterns, then lose them, only to find them in another location minutes later. Crew members reported seeing flashes of motion, figures or silhouettes, but no one could identify what they were. Some said it felt like humans or what humans might have become, though no one could be certain. The sense of intelligence of design was undeniable. Even more unnerving were the signals. Strange pulses of energy, structured in complex sequences, were detected and analyzed by every capable civilization. At first, scientists dismissed them as interference, glitches, or natural phenomena, but the patterns were too precise, too deliberate. Every attempt to interpret them failed, yet everyone who studied them felt the same thing. They were meant to be noticed. They were a message, though no one knew what it meant. Some began to suspect that humans were leaving a trail, a breadcrumb path for those curious or foolish enough to follow. Rumors about what humans had become began to multiply. Some believed that humanity had transcended physical form, evolving into beings of pure energy, capable of manipulating space and matter. Others suggested that humans had created autonomous structures that could think, plan, and move on their own. Whatever the truth, the Forbidden Zone became synonymous with mystery, danger, and awe. Entire fleets hesitated at its edge, afraid to cross, yet unable to ignore the possibility of discovering something monumental. Stories from the explorers fueled a mix of fear and fascination. One account told of a small reconnaissance vessel that entered the zone and disappeared for days. When it returned, the crew spoke of passing through a corridor where space itself seemed alive, where stars shifted and colors changed in impossible ways. They described seeing shadows that moved independently of light, patterns in the void that hinted at intelligence. And at the center of it all, they said, there was a presence, something watching, silent, patient, yet unmistakably aware. The galaxy was no longer just curious. It was unsettled. Scientists and philosophers debated endlessly. Could humans have evolved beyond matter? Could they have discovered a way to exist outside the limitations of space and time? Some feared that humanity had become so powerful that any contact could be catastrophic. Others speculated that humans were merely observing, studying the galaxy as a teacher watches students, or as a guardian watches its domain. But no one could agree on anything, because there was no direct communication, no evidence, only glimpses and anomalies. Despite the danger, some civilizations attempted to explore further. Ships ventured into the zone armed with powerful shields, advanced navigation systems, and multiple contingencies. Many never returned. Those who did reported the same haunting phenomena: shifting lights, strange sounds, and structures that seemed impossible to exist naturally. They described a sense of being watched, not in fear, but in judgment. Something or someone was monitoring them, analyzing every action, every decision, every thought. And the most chilling realization was that these watchers were humans, or at least something that had once been human. The galaxy began to take notice in a different way. Fear replaced curiosity, but fascination remained. Everyone wanted to understand the humans, yet no one dared to confront them directly. Stories of ships disappearing, crews going mad, and signals that defied comprehension spread across every world. Merchants, travelers, and diplomats whispered about the zone with reverence and caution. Children grew up hearing tales of humans who had left quietly, only to create a place where no one could follow without risk. Even centuries later, the mystery remained intact, untouched, and unbroken. In the empty sectors of space, the humans' influence lingered in subtle ways. Systems they had touched still maintained a level of balance, almost as if human energy had been left behind. Trade networks faltered without guidance, but certain technologies continued to operate with efficiency no one could fully explain. It was as if humans had set a framework in motion, one that continued long after their departure. And the Forbidden Zone was the most extreme expression of that framework, a place where humans were absent physically but present in ways that no other species could perceive. Leaders began to realize something crucial. Humans had not left to vanish or to hide. Their departure had been purposeful. They had created a space where observation, learning, and influence could continue without direct interference. It was not a trap and it was not abandonment. It was preparation, a way for humans to exist beyond the limitations of the galaxy while still shaping its future. The galaxy could only guess at the scale and purpose of what humans had created. But one fact became painfully clear. No species could rival the subtle genius of humanity. Not in technology, not in strategy, and certainly not in foresight. As decades turned into centuries, the Forbidden Zone became the ultimate symbol of human mystery. Explorers, scholars, and dreamers all speculated about its nature. Some believed that the zone contained the secrets of human evolution. Others thought it was a testing ground, where humans could judge the readiness of other civilizations. And still others feared it was a warning, a message to the galaxy that human influence was far from over, and that their return, if it ever came, would change everything. But for those who had glimpsed it firsthand, the message was even more profound. Humans had departed quietly, yet they had left a presence that could not be ignored. They had created a space where the galaxy could witness their absence and understand, in time, the power and intelligence that had always driven them. And though the zone was dangerous, even frightening, it was also a reminder of what humans had once been, and what they might have become. The galaxy had entered a new era, one without humans physically present, yet defined by their absence and by the strange haunting signs they had left behind. Every civilization, from the smallest mining colony to the largest empire, now understood that humans were more than a species. They were a force, unpredictable and brilliant, whose quiet departure had left the galaxy unprepared, yet forever changed. And somewhere in the uncharted reaches of the Forbidden Zone, humans, or what they had become, watched silently, waiting, observing, not intervening yet, but aware of every choice, every movement, every mistake. The galaxy had not seen it coming, and even now it had no idea of the full scale of humanity's plan. But one thing was certain: the humans who had disappeared quietly were still shaping the future, and their presence, hidden in the void, was more powerful than anyone could imagine. The longer humans remained absent, the more the galaxy began to unravel. Systems that had once been stable grew chaotic. Minor disagreements between planets became full-blown conflicts. Trade routes that had once been carefully balanced began to collapse. Without humans to mediate, tension spread quickly, and the Council of Worlds struggled to maintain control. Every attempt to stabilize the galaxy seemed to fail. The absence of humans was not just a void. It was a growing pressure that threatened to break everything apart. The Council, which had always been confident in its power, found itself in a new kind of fear. For centuries, humans had been the unpredictable but reliable force that kept others in check. They had prevented wars, mediated conflicts, and guided civilizations toward compromise. Without them, the Council realized how much it had relied on human insight. Their strategies, once effective, now seemed slow, rigid, and hopelessly ineffective. Diplomats argued endlessly. Fleets were sent to conflicts that escalated faster than anticipated, and entire sectors of space slipped into chaos. Panic began to spread among the galaxy's leaders. Some worlds tried to take advantage of the situation, expanding territory or seizing resources that humans had once protected. Smaller civilizations, emboldened by the absence of humans, engaged in skirmishes that escalated into real wars. Civilian populations suffered as supply chains faltered, as security forces failed to respond, and as chaos replaced order. The galaxy that humans had quietly shaped for centuries was now exposed as fragile, vulnerable, and uncertain. Even technology, which had always been considered reliable, showed its limits. Human-designed systems began to fail when left unattended. Automated fleets lost coordination. Trade drones collided or wandered off course, Research stations produced data that no one could analyze because the humans who had created the frameworks were gone. Every machine, every system, every network had depended on human creativity, judgment, and foresight, and now that guidance was missing. The galaxy was discovering slowly and painfully that humans had been more than just a species. They had been the framework holding civilization together. Amid this growing chaos, some civilizations tried to fill the void left by humans. They developed new fleets, built new alliances, and attempted to create systems that mimicked human decision-making. But none succeeded. Military strategies were predictable, diplomacy was formulaic, and trade networks remained fragile. It became painfully clear that no species could replace humans. Their unique ability to balance logic and intuition, to anticipate consequences and to act with both patience and courage, could not be replicated. The galaxy had depended on something that could not be copied, and the consequences were terrifying. Within the council itself, tension rose to dangerous levels. Meetings that had once been routine became battles of opinion and ego. Leaders blamed each other for failures that were no one's fault. Every decision seemed to make matters worse, yet every failure reminded them of the humans who had once solved problems they could not even understand. The council realized that humans had not only been mediators, they had been innovators, diplomats, and protectors all at once. Their absence revealed just how much the galaxy had underestimated them. Meanwhile, reports from explorers of the Forbidden Zone continued to arrive. Ships ventured closer to the mysterious sector, hoping to find clues about humans, but many never returned. Those who did came back with stories that defied comprehension. Structures that moved as if alive, lights that bent space, sounds that seemed intelligent. Every observation reminded the galaxy that humans had not left simply to disappear. They had created something far beyond the understanding of anyone else. The council's desperation grew. They realized that without humans there was no way to understand, manage, or even predict the course of events across the galaxy. Civilizations outside the council's reach felt the strain too. Pirates and warlords took advantage of the instability, striking wherever they could. Former allies turned against one another, seeking to expand territories or gain resources. Trade, once a web of delicate balance maintained in part by humans, now faltered. Star systems that had been wealthy and thriving became isolated and vulnerable. In every corner of the galaxy, the influence humans had left behind was missing, and everyone felt it. Even those who had once feared humans realized now how essential they had been. Scholars and historians reviewed records, piecing together examples of human intervention. Battles averted, wars prevented, alliances forged. These were not acts of domination or conquest. They were subtle, thoughtful actions that guided civilizations toward survival and prosperity. And now, without humans, the galaxy faced the painful reality that none of these skills, none of this foresight existed elsewhere. The humans had left behind a framework that only they could fully understand or operate. The council tried desperately to compensate. They sent fleets to enforce order, created new regulations to maintain trade, and attempted to rebuild diplomatic channels. But every intervention lacked the spark that humans had provided. Conflicts escalated instead of resolving. Trade networks were disrupted instead of stabilized. Even AI systems designed to assist in management and decision-making failed to account for the human unpredictability that had once balanced the galaxy. It was not incompetence, it was simply that no one could think and act like humans had. Fear began to take root across the galaxy. Leaders, merchants, and civilians all realized that humans had been the quiet guardians of their worlds. Without them, vulnerability spread. Plans failed, alliances weakened, and long-standing peace dissolved. Every civilization began to understand that the humans' departure had not been random or careless. It had been calculated, deliberate, and perhaps even intentional in its silence. By leaving quietly, humans forced the galaxy to face its own weaknesses, exposing fragility in ways that no other species could have. The desperation of the council reached its peak when a major conflict erupted in a sector that humans had once overseen. The two largest civilizations in that sector went to war over resources, completely disregarding warnings. Fleets were deployed, worlds were devastated, and the council struggled to contain the violence. Their strategies were slow and communication failed. For the first time in centuries, entire populations were caught in wars that humans had prevented countless times before. The absence of humans was no longer theoretical. It was deadly. Meanwhile, scientists and strategists attempted to learn from human history, studying patterns of intervention, negotiation, and conflict resolution. They realized that humans had been patient, flexible, and inventive. They acted not according to rigid rules, but according to insight, intuition, and timing that no algorithm or species could match. Without them, civilization faltered. They had been the invisible hand guiding the galaxy, and now that hand was gone. Even ordinary citizens felt the weight of human absence. Communities that had relied on human technology, guidance, or trade now faced shortages, instability, and fear. Children grew up hearing stories of humans who had vanished quietly, tales that mixed awe and longing. Adults struggled to maintain order, commerce, and security. It was as if the galaxy had been cast into adolescence, forced to learn responsibility without the guidance of its wisest teachers. And yet, amidst all this chaos, one fact remained clear. Humans had not disappeared by accident. Every abandoned system, every empty station, every drifting fleet hinted at deliberate design. The galaxy could see the result of their absence, but not the reason behind it. Every crisis, every failure, every conflict became a testament to how much humans had shaped life across the stars. They had departed quietly, leaving behind not destruction, but a mirror that reflected the galaxy's fragility and dependence. As the centuries stretched on, the Council's desperation transformed into something more than fear. It became obsession. Leaders, scientists, and strategists devoted lifetimes to understanding the human's absence. They studied every anomaly, every signal, every artifact. Explorers continued to venture near the forbidden zone, seeking answers, though few returned. The galaxy realized that humans had not vanished. They had become something beyond comprehension. Their influence persisted, guiding, shaping, and challenging civilizations from a distance, while their physical presence remained a mystery. In the end, the Council and every civilization learned a lesson that could not be ignored. Humans had not been reckless, and they had not been careless. Their quiet departure had revealed the truth about every civilization, every system, and every leader. Without humans, the galaxy was fragile, unprepared, and vulnerable. And perhaps that was exactly what humans had intended, to show in their absence how essential they had truly been. Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, humans observed it all. They watched the galaxy struggle, adapt, and occasionally fail. They saw the Council's desperation, the chaos of trade and war, and the fear that spread across civilizations. And they waited, quietly, patiently. Humans had departed, yes, but they had not left. Not truly. The galaxy had not seen it coming. And even now, it had no idea what humans had planned next. And in that silence, the galaxy understood one undeniable truth. Humans had been gone, but their absence was more powerful than any fleet, any weapon, or any council. They had left the galaxy. For centuries, the galaxy had lived in uncertainty, grappling with the absence of humans. Conflicts flared, trade networks faltered, and the Council of Worlds struggled to maintain order. But even as civilization stumbled, faint signs began to emerge from the edges of space, strange signals that no one could ignore. They were structured, deliberate, and unmistakably human. The moment these signals reached multiple worlds at once, every species realized something extraordinary was happening. Humans were no longer just absent. They were preparing to reveal themselves in a way the galaxy could not have imagined. The first reports came from deep space probes, instruments designed to detect energy anomalies, recorded pulses of light and patterns that defied conventional explanation. Scientists struggled to interpret them, yet everyone who analyzed the signals felt the same sense of awe and unease. It was not a call for help, not a request, not even a warning. It was an announcement, a message deliberately sent to every corner of the galaxy, transmitted in every known language and frequency. The words, simple yet profound, reached every planet, every outpost, and every fleet. We left to watch, to learn, to evolve. You were warned not to lose yourselves. The galaxy froze. Entire civilizations stopped their daily routines to process the revelation. Traders paused, fleets halted, and diplomats ceased negotiations. Scholars pored over the words, debating their meaning. Historians compared the message to every record of human behavior, trying to understand what humans had become. But nothing in history, nothing in philosophy or science could prepare them for what was coming next. Moments after the message, the first human structures appeared at the edges of multiple galaxies. They were massive, more vast than any city or fleet had ever been. Their scale was incomprehensible. Entire worlds seemed to orbit inside these constructions, which shimmered with energy and moved in ways that defied known physics. Ships sent to investigate reported energy fields that altered gravity, warped light, and distorted time. It was as though the universe itself had been reshaped by these structures, yet no violence accompanied them. Humans had returned, not with weapons but with power so immense that it could not be ignored. Every species realized the truth slowly, painfully. Humans had not disappeared to hide. They had evolved. They were no longer limited by flesh, bone, or conventional space travel. They had become something greater, beings of energy, thought, and pure intelligence. They could move across galaxies effortlessly, shape matter with their minds, and perceive time in ways no other species could comprehend. What had once been a species known for creativity, diplomacy, and courage had transformed into something far beyond understanding. Explorers sent to approach these structures were overwhelmed. Ships would enter the vicinity, only to find themselves enveloped in light, consciousness, and sensation. Some described a feeling of being connected to everything at once, every planet, every star, every living thing, yet also completely separate. Crew members reported visions of civilizations as if they had been projected into their minds, showing the rise and fall of empires in moments. And throughout all of it, the humans observed silently. No words were spoken, no commands given. Yet everyone sensed that they were being judged, measured, and understood. The Council of Worlds, already desperate in the absence of humans, found itself utterly powerless. Fleets that had once maintained order now seemed trivial in comparison to the humans' presence. Diplomacy, law, and force, all the tools the Council had relied on, were meaningless in the face of beings who could observe, intervene, and reshape reality with thought alone. For the first time, every leader understood what humans had truly been capable of, and the realization was terrifying. The galaxy had been underestimating them for centuries, and now it was impossible to do so. Yet humans did not act with aggression. They did not attack, conquer, or enslave. Instead, they moved deliberately, correcting imbalances caused by their absence. Civilizations that had fallen into war were stabilized. Star systems that had suffered economic collapse were reorganized and restored. The humans' intervention was precise, almost surgical, and it carried an unmistakable sense of purpose. They were not punishing the galaxy. They were restoring it. Even the most skeptical scientists could not deny the evidence. Structures appeared in empty space, transporting energy, resources, and information in ways that no machine could replicate. Diseases that had spread in neglected colonies were eradicated. Environmental damage on planets caused by overpopulation or neglect was reversed. Civilizations that had been struggling to survive were suddenly thriving again, though they could not understand why. Humans had created a system that balanced entire galaxies, operating with logic and foresight that no other species could emulate. Reports from observers were almost identical across the galaxy. Humans, now luminous beings of thought and energy, moved among their structures, shaping matter, analyzing civilizations, and guiding evolution in ways that were invisible to most. Those who glimpsed them described sensations of calm, awe, and fear. Humans no longer belonged to the material universe in the traditional sense, yet their influence was undeniable. They had left the galaxy for centuries, only to return in a form that made their previous absence both purposeful and inevitable. At the same time, the humans' message continued to resonate. You were warned not to lose yourselves. The galaxy began to understand that the chaos, the conflicts, and the instability had not gone unnoticed. Humans had observed the mistakes, the struggles, and the failures. They had allowed the galaxy to experience the consequences of its actions, to learn and adapt, before intervening in a way that could not be ignored. It was both a lesson and a revelation. Humanity had evolved, and with their evolution came perspective far beyond the understanding of any other species. The realization transformed civilizations. For the first time, species saw themselves as part of a larger system, one in which their actions had consequences far beyond their perception. Wars and disputes that had seemed critical now appeared small in comparison to the humans' presence and understanding. Leaders reconsidered their priorities, and scholars began studying the humans' patterns, trying to glean insights from a species that no longer existed in the traditional sense. The galaxy had been given a chance to grow, but only under the watchful eyes of humans who had transcended normal limits. Even ordinary people felt the change. Citizens looked up at the stars and sensed the humans' presence, though they had no direct contact. Traders, miners, and farmers noticed subtle shifts in markets and natural systems, changes that made life easier, safer, and more predictable. Yet none could fully explain why. It was as though humans had left behind a gentle guiding hand, silent, invisible, but unmistakably there. The galaxy, once chaotic and fragile in their absence, began to regain balance slowly, carefully, and in ways that only humans could orchestrate. Stories spread about the humans' new form. Some claimed that they were beings of pure light, existing simultaneously in multiple places at once. Others said that humans could perceive time differently, witnessing events before they happened and subtly guiding outcomes to maintain harmony. Explorers spoke of being shown visions of past civilizations, witnessing lessons that humans had learned over millennia. The more the galaxy understood, the more it realized how little it truly knew. Humans had departed quietly, only to return in a way that no one could have predicted. The scale of their intervention was staggering. Entire regions of space that had been struggling for centuries were reorganized almost instantly. Planets that had been in environmental or economic crisis recovered. Civilizations on the brink of collapse were stabilized, and yet the humans did not interfere directly in cultural, political, or personal matters. Their goal was not control but balance. They were guardians, observers, and teachers, operating on a level that no other species could hope to reach. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy recognized the truth. Humans had never truly disappeared. They had evolved, transcended, and prepared for this moment. Their absence had been intentional, a test of patience and resilience for the civilizations they had left behind. And now their presence was undeniable. Every action, every intervention, every restoration bore the unmistakable mark of humanity's intelligence, foresight, and purpose. As the galaxy adjusted to the humans' return, one thing became clear: nothing would ever be the same. The civilizations that had struggled without human guidance now had a chance to grow under their careful observation. The Council of Worlds, once desperate and powerless, finally understood that the humans' evolution had been deliberate, precise, and beyond comprehension. And in every corner of space, from the smallest colony to the largest empire, beings of all kinds looked up at the stars and realized a truth that would change their understanding forever. Humans had left quietly, and now they had returned. Not as before, but as something far greater. The humans' return was not about revenge, conquest, or domination. It was a revelation, a lesson, and a restoration. They had watched, they had waited, and now they had acted in a way that no one could ignore. The galaxy had never seen it coming, and even as it witnessed the magnitude of humanity's evolution, it could not fully comprehend the wisdom, power, and foresight behind ES. The galaxy had been forever changed by the absence of humans. For centuries, civilizations had struggled, stumbled, and fought to maintain order without the quiet guidance of a species that had always been more than it seemed. But now, after decades of uncertainty and exploration, the humans were back, not as the beings that had once walked among the stars, but as something greater, wiser, and more powerful. Their return was not announced with fanfare, nor did it arrive with aggression. It came like a gentle, unstoppable wave, reshaping everything it touched. When the first civilizations fully comprehended the humans' presence, there was a mixture of fear, awe, and relief. Ships that had once explored the edges of human territory reported encountering radiant structures, invisible energy flows, and forms of light that moved with purpose and awareness. Humans were no longer confined to physical bodies or single locations. They existed simultaneously across galaxies, observing, analyzing, and subtly influencing outcomes to restore balance. Every signal, every pulse of energy, every alteration in space-time seemed deliberate, yet none of it carried violence. It was as if the galaxy itself had been placed under the care of a species that had transcended all limitations. The Council of Worlds convened in emergency sessions, trying to understand how to interact with humans now. Diplomacy seemed almost pointless. No counselor could hope to match the scale of awareness and intelligence the humans now possessed. Yet as the humans moved through space, their influence was clear. Wars that had raged for decades were halted, not by force but by intervention that subtly guided choices. Trade networks that had collapsed were restored. Natural disasters were mitigated, The galaxy experienced relief and stability, but it was accompanied by an undeniable sense of judgment. Humans were not angry, they were not hostile, but they had been watching, and they had seen the consequences of the galaxy's actions in their absence. Every civilization began to reflect. Leaders asked themselves why humans had left in the first place. Why had they vanished so quietly, leaving chaos behind? Scholars combed historical records, searching for patterns in human behavior that might explain their sudden disappearance. Then it became clear, humans had been teaching the galaxy a lesson, not with destruction but with absence. They had allowed every species to experience the consequences of their own decisions, to understand fragility, and to face failure before guiding the galaxy toward renewal. It was a lesson in responsibility, in balance, and in the value of foresight. Humans did not communicate directly, at least not in a way that was familiar. Messages appeared across frequencies and forms, interpreted by technology, AI, or the most sensitive minds. These messages were not commands or orders. They were reminders, suggestions, and insights meant to provoke thought, reflection, and growth. Planets struggling with resource shortages received guidance on how to restore balance. Star systems at war were subtly nudged toward negotiation. Even isolated colonies that had forgotten the humans' influence found their environment stabilizing in ways that seemed impossible. Yet the humans' presence was more than intervention. It was transformation. Some civilizations reported glimpses of humans in forms of radiant light, moving like constellations, interacting with energy fields, and shaping matter effortlessly. They could perceive time differently, noticing past and future simultaneously, and their actions reflected an understanding of causality that no other species could comprehend. Witnessing them was overwhelming. Crews who saw even a fraction of their presence spoke of awe, reverence, and fear. Fear not of destruction, but of their own insignificance in comparison. The galaxy began to change in profound ways. Political systems that had been rigid and competitive became cooperative, not because humans demanded it, but because civilizations instinctively understood the wisdom in collaboration. Technology advanced in ways that mimicked human design, reflecting patterns that humans had left behind in abandoned research or structures. Communication networks became more efficient. Energy systems stabilized. The galaxy had begun to heal, guided by intelligence that was no longer human in form but unmistakably human in essence. Even ordinary beings felt the impact. Farmers noticed that ecosystems rebounded naturally. Trade merchants discovered smoother routes, and children grew up learning stories of humans not as conquerors, but as protectors and guides. There was a pervasive sense of connection, a subtle awareness that the humans were present everywhere, even if unseen. The galaxy felt both smaller and larger at once, united by the invisible influence of a species that had mastered both presence and absence. The humans' ultimate lesson became clear. Power without wisdom was meaningless, and absence could be as influential as presence. They had departed quietly to demonstrate the fragility of civilizations left to their own devices. They had returned not as rulers, but as guides, guardians, and observers. Their intervention was precise, never destructive, always calculated to preserve life while teaching responsibility. The galaxy realized that humans had never sought dominance, they had sought understanding, balance, and growth. Explorers and scientists who ventured near the humans' radiant structures often reported a sense of time expanding and contracting simultaneously. They described visions of entire civilizations rising and falling within moments, lessons of leadership, cooperation, and foresight projected directly into their minds. Even the most skeptical observers admitted that they had never encountered anything like this. Humans had transcended the physical and the temporal, yet their actions remained tied to the well-being of every world they had ever touched. Stories and legends about the humans multiplied. Some civilizations described them as beings of pure energy, capable of moving instantly across galaxies. Others spoke of humans shaping reality as if it were clay, guiding events and systems with thought alone. But the most consistent accounts emphasized one thing: humans did not act for themselves. They acted for the galaxy. Their actions were deliberate, thoughtful, and rooted in the care of life itself. In their transformation, humans had retained the essence that had always defined them: intelligence, creativity, and empathy, amplified to unimaginable levels. The galaxy, finally, began to understand the magnitude of what had been lost and what had been regained. Humans had left to observe, to test, and to teach. Their absence had been a challenge, their return a revelation. Every species, every civilization, every individual felt the weight of the lesson. The humans' quiet departure had shown vulnerability. Their luminous return demonstrated wisdom. It was a reminder that intelligence alone was insufficient, and that foresight, patience, and empathy were the true measure of power. Even the Council of Worlds, which had struggled for centuries, found itself humbled. Fleets once considered unstoppable seemed trivial in comparison. Policies that had shaped interstellar society were now subject to the subtle influence of beings who could perceive the consequences of every choice before it was made. The Council realized that the humans had never needed armies, laws, or commands to influence the galaxy. Their absence, their presence, and the intelligence that flowed between both had been enough. For ordinary citizens, the humans' influence became a quiet part of life. Children grew up knowing that humanity had transcended, yet left lessons everywhere they looked. Trade became smoother, planets were healthier, and conflicts were less frequent. Even those who never saw humans directly felt their presence in subtle ways. It was not fear or awe alone that defined the experience, it was trust. The galaxy had learned to rely on humans in ways that were deeper than any physical system, military force, or law could achieve. And yet, humans did not claim credit. They were not rulers, nor did they demand recognition. They existed as a force beyond comprehension, ensuring balance, observing growth, and guiding without interference. Their presence was subtle yet undeniable. Their actions were deliberate yet unseen by most. The galaxy had once been unprepared for their absence. Now it was unprepared for their return. But this time the lesson was one of hope, wisdom, and transformation. The humans had departed quietly to teach. They had returned quietly to guide. The galaxy had finally begun to understand that their influence was far greater than anyone had ever imagined. Civilizations that had struggled, stumbled, and faltered without them now had a chance to thrive, not because of domination, but because of guidance and foresight. Humans had shown that true power lay not in force but in wisdom, creativity, and patience, the qualities that had always defined them. In the end, the galaxy settled into a new equilibrium. Civilizations worked together, guided by the unseen hands of humans. Systems stabilized, conflicts diminished, and life flourished in ways that no one could have achieved alone. And throughout it all, humans watched quietly, patiently, and knowingly. They had disappeared once to teach a lesson. They had returned to restore balance. Their presence, whether seen or unseen, became the ultimate reminder that humanity had always been, and would always remain, the quiet force shaping the destiny of the stars. And so, the galaxy learned its final truth. Humans had never truly left. They had only chosen when, how, and in what form to return. The universe had underestimated them once, and it would never make that mistake again. Their quiet departure had reshaped the